The charity gala was supposed to be a glamorous night, the kind of event where people took photos beside giant flower walls and talked about changing the world while holding glasses of champagne. My company bought a table, so I had to go. Everyone seemed excited to dress up, especially the coworkers who loved any chance to wear something fancy and post about it. For me, the idea of a big party always felt heavy. I could pretend to enjoy it, but inside, large crowds made my heart beat too fast. I liked quiet places, soft lights, small conversations. But tonight, I had to smile and act like I belonged. The venue was beautiful. Crystal lights hung from the ceiling, guests floated from one group to another, and there was music playing softly under all the talking. People wore glittering dresses and perfect suits. Everyone seemed perfectly comfortable, except me. I talked to people from work for a while. I laughed at the right moments, nodded when someone talked about business, made myself look completely fine. Inside, though, it felt loud and overwhelming. After almost an hour, I needed a break. I quietly stepped away from my table, pretending I had to make a call. I pushed open one of the side doors and walked out. The air outside was cool, the night sky soft and dark. I breathed deeply and felt my shoulders relax. I found a small garden behind the building. It felt like a hidden corner, quiet and calm, with old stone pathways, dim lights, and a few benches. No music, no clinking glasses, no chatter. It reminded me how good silence could feel. Someone was sitting on a bench near a shadowy patch of roses. A man, dressed in a simple suit, elbows on his knees, looking like he was deep in thought. I hesitated, not wanting to disturb him, but then he turned and saw me. "Oh," he said gently. "Sorry. I didn't mean to startle you." "You didn't," I replied. "I just needed some air." He gave a small smile that didn't feel forced. "Same here." There was something calming about him immediately. He didn't stare, didn't push for conversation. He just shifted over slightly, silently inviting me to sit if I wanted. I surprised myself by walking over and taking the seat. "I'm Mark," he said after a moment. "Anna," I replied. We sat quietly at first, both of us listening to the soft rustle of leaves. Then, almost without planning it, we started talking. First about small things, how these events felt too loud, the ridiculous decorations inside, the fact that the dessert table looked more like an art gallery than food. Mark made me laugh within minutes. He didn't try to be charming. He just said things in a way that felt honest and warm. He listened when I spoke, really listened, without looking over my shoulder at other people or getting distracted. Hours passed without either of us noticing. We talked about books we loved, places we wanted to travel, childhood dreams that still felt alive somewhere inside us. It felt like we were creating a little world inside that garden, a quiet, safe place just for two strangers who suddenly felt familiar. Eventually, we were both exhausted. The night had grown late and cold. Behind the garden, there was a small guest house, maybe for workers or special visitors. Its door was half open, light spilling softly from inside. Mark looked at me. "Do you want to sit inside for a bit? Just somewhere quiet?" His voice had no pressure in it. He was tired. I was tired, and all we wanted was a peaceful place to rest for a moment. I nodded. Inside, the room was simple. One sofa, one narrow daybed, soft yellow lamps. We sat down without much talking, the exhaustion wrapped around us like a blanket. Somehow, without planning it, we both fell asleep. Mark stretched out on the sofa. I lay on the small daybed. It felt natural, safe, unpretentious. I didn't feel afraid or uncomfortable. Instead, I felt something I couldn't explain, something soft and warm, something new. In the morning, sunlight slid across the room. I woke first. Mark was still asleep on the sofa, peaceful, the quiet morning sitting around him like a gentle glow. I looked at him for a long moment. I didn't even know his last name. I didn't have his number. I only knew he made me laugh, made me feel calm, made me feel seen. Before he woke, I slipped out quietly. I wasn't afraid. I wasn't confused. I just didn't know what to do. I walked out of the small guest house with a strange mix of sadness and happiness. I had met someone who made me feel something rare, and now he was just a memory. For the next few days, life went back to normal. I went to work, talked to friends, did all the usual things. But whenever I had a quiet moment, my mind drifted to Mark. I wondered if I'd ever see him again. I wondered if he thought about me too. It felt like a chapter of a story left unfinished. Then one afternoon, my best friend Sarah called me. Her voice came through the phone like fireworks. "Anna, oh my God, I'm engaged!" I laughed, full of surprise and joy for her. "Sarah, that's amazing. I'm so happy for you." "You have to meet him," she said. "He's incredible." I realized I'd never met her boyfriend. He traveled a lot for work, so he was always out of town, but she had talked about him for months. She invited me to a small dinner at her apartment so I could finally meet the man who made her so happy. That evening, I walked into Sarah's warm apartment, smiling at the soft lights and the scent of the food she was cooking. She ran to the door and hugged me. "He's here," she said excitedly. "You're going to love him." I walked into the living room, and then everything inside me froze. Standing beside Sarah was Mark. Mark from the garden. Mark from the quiet night. Mark whose voice and smile had stayed in my mind for days. His eyes widened when he saw me. For a moment, he looked exactly like I felt. Shocked, confused, panicked. But within seconds, he straightened his face and forced a polite smile. "Anna, this is my fiancé Mark," Sarah said, holding his arm proudly. Mark nodded at me with the stiff politeness of a stranger. "Nice to meet you." It felt like lightning tore through my chest. I forced a smile, because what else could I do? "Nice to meet you too," I said. It felt like a lie spilling out of my mouth. Sarah didn't notice anything. She was glowing with happiness. To her, this moment was perfect. She couldn't see the storm quietly forming between Mark and me. The dinner that followed was one of the hardest nights of my life. I could barely eat. I could barely speak. Mark pretended we had never seen each other before. He laughed at Sarah's stories, held her hand, and talked about wedding plans. I sat across from them, feeling sick with guilt and confusion. Sarah asked me questions about the wedding colors. I answered automatically. My mind was somewhere else entirely, in the garden, in the guest house, in the hours Mark and I talked like old friends. He belonged to someone else now. Not just someone, my best friend. A few days later, Sarah asked me to be her maid of honor. I said yes. How could I say no? That meant seeing Mark constantly. Wedding planning became torture. We looked at dresses, tasted cakes, flipped through magazines. Sometimes Sarah walked away to take a call or check something, and Mark and I would be left alone for a moment. Those moments were heavy. One day, as we sat looking at invitation designs, Mark whispered, "Anna, the garden." That night, I cut him off quickly. "Please, Mark, we can't talk about this." He looked down, eyes full of regret. He whispered, "I didn't know. I had no idea you were Sarah's friend. If I had known." His voice trailed off. Days kept passing, each one filled with secret glances, unspoken words, a growing tension that felt dangerous. My feelings didn't fade. They grew stronger. I could feel Mark's emotions too, even though we said nothing openly. It felt like standing on the edge of something we weren't allowed to touch. One afternoon, when we visited a beautiful old house as a potential wedding venue, Sarah went inside to talk to the manager. Mark and I stood by a large window, sunlight falling on the floor between us. He turned toward me and said softly, "Anna, I don't know what to do. I can't stop thinking about you." My heart beat like it was trying to escape my chest. I didn't get the chance to say anything because Sarah came back into the room at that moment. Mark and I stepped away from each other so quickly it looked like we were magnets forced apart. Sarah didn't notice, or maybe she didn't want to. I couldn't sleep that night. The whole situation weighed on me. It felt like a stone pressing on my chest. Then one evening Mark called me. His voice was shaky. "Anna, I can't marry Sarah. Not like this. Not when I feel what I feel." My breath caught in my throat. He asked, "Was that night special to you too? Tell me the truth." It was the moment that could change everything. My heart felt pulled in two directions, toward Mark and toward Sarah, who trusted me completely. After a long silence, I finally said, "We need to talk. In person." We met secretly in a quiet park. Mark told me he was falling in love with me. He said Sarah was wonderful, but what he felt for me was deeper, stronger. He reached for my hand, and for a second, the world felt like it might tilt in a new direction. Then my phone rang. It was Sarah. She was crying. She said she felt scared, like something bad was happening. Hearing her voice broke something inside me. I pulled my hand from Mark's. "I can't," I whispered. "I can't do this to her," and I ran. The week before the wedding, the truth finally came out. Sarah found an old note I had written to myself months earlier, my quiet confession about the man in the garden. She read it, confused at first, then hurt, then furious. Her heart broke in front of us. Mark admitted everything. He confessed the garden. He confessed his feelings. He confessed the truth Sarah never imagined. Sarah cried like her entire world was falling apart. Her family got involved. They confronted both of us. No one held back their anger. There was shouting, accusations, heartbreak everywhere. The wedding was canceled. Our friendship, Sarah's and mine, shattered instantly. Everyone knew what happened. Everyone had an opinion. People talked about me with harsh voices. They looked at Mark and me like we had committed an unforgivable crime. Mark and I became a couple after that, but it wasn't easy. Our relationship began in a storm. We tried to build something real, but we carried the guilt like a shadow. We loved each other, but we also carried Sarah's pain everywhere we went. This was the beginning of our new life, a life built from something complicated, fragile, and deeply human. The days after the canceled wedding moved like slow waves, heavy, dragging, filled with murmurs that never seemed to stop. Sarah didn't speak to me again. She didn't need to. The look on her face that day, shock turning into heartbreak, heartbreak turning into rage, was carved into me permanently. I replayed it every night while trying to sleep. Sometimes I woke up with my heart pounding, remembering how her voice cracked when she called me a traitor. People around us didn't stay quiet. They talked, they judged, they whispered. It didn't take long before everyone in town seemed to know some version of our story. Some added details that never happened. Some removed the parts where the pain was mutual. Gossip always reshapes itself until it no longer looks like truth. I avoided places where I might run into anyone who knew me. Going out felt like stepping under a bright spotlight with no escape. Even friends I had known for years kept a distance. Their messages became shorter, their tone became colder. Some stopped replying altogether. A scandal has a way of showing who stays and who silently walks away. Mark tried his best to reach out to his family. They were devastated. His mother cried on the phone. His father's disappointment was sharp, like a blade under the words he didn't say. Mark didn't defend himself much. He knew he had made choices that hurt people deeply, but he also knew the truth inside him, the part he couldn't run from. He loved me, and trying to deny it had only made everything worse. Despite everything, we tried to move forward. We tried to find a rhythm that didn't hurt as much. Sometimes we succeeded for a few hours, having coffee together, walking quietly through empty streets, cooking something simple for dinner. But it didn't take long before the weight came back. Something would remind us of Sarah, a bridal shop window, a song she used to like, an old message in my phone that I couldn't delete, and the guilt would return, filling the room like cold air. One evening, Mark came over to my apartment. He looked tired, his shoulders tense, his face heavy with worry. "We need to talk," he said. My stomach tightened. Words like that usually meant pain. He sat on the edge of my sofa, running a hand through his hair. "People are blaming us for everything," he said quietly. "And maybe part of that blame is fair, but I don't want to lose you too." His voice softened. "Not after everything." I sat beside him and leaned into him. We were both hurting, both exhausted. But even with everything we were going through, being next to Mark still felt like a place my heart understood. "We're in this together," I said softly. He took my hand and nodded. "Then we need to decide what our future looks like. Really looks like." It was the first time we spoke about the future with clarity instead of fear. We decided not to hide anymore, not from ourselves, not from the world. If people talked, they talked. If they judged, they judged. Pain doesn't disappear by pretending it's not there. It only grows darker. But moving forward wasn't simple. We had to face the truth that our love began at the wrong time, in the wrong way. It wasn't romantic or perfect. It didn't look like the stories people crave. It was messy, painful, and complicated. Still, underneath all the chaos, something real existed. Something neither of us wanted to let go of. We started rebuilding our lives one quiet step at a time. We chose different restaurants so we wouldn't run into familiar faces. We walked in parks further from town. We tried new routines, new grocery stores, new little habits that didn't remind us of anyone else. Even then, guilt lived inside me like a shadow that followed every step. I missed Sarah, missed her laughter, her silly jokes, her warm hugs. Sometimes I cried quietly at night because losing her felt like losing a sister. But I also knew she couldn't forgive me, at least not now. Maybe not ever. Mark carried his own guilt too. Sometimes he couldn't sleep. Sometimes he stared at the ceiling in silence, wondering how everything spiraled from a simple night in a garden to this storm that swallowed all of us. But love doesn't wait for perfect timing. It arrives whenever it wants, at a gala, in a garden, in a moment nobody expects. And once it arrives, it changes everything forever. We both understood that love comes with a price sometimes. Ours came with a heavy one. Months passed. The noise around us slowly quieted. People found new things to talk about. The scandal became old news, the way scandals always do. Mark and I began to breathe normally again. We visited small cafes where no one recognized us. We walked by the river at sunset. We learned each other's routines, fears, habits. I learned the way he liked his coffee. He learned the way I slept curled into blankets. I learned the way he went quiet when he was thinking. He learned the way I laughed when I tried not to. We talked about Sarah sometimes, not out of guilt, but out of respect. She had been a big part of both our lives. Her absence lived quietly beside us, like a room we didn't open anymore but still remembered. One night, as we sat on my balcony with warm drinks in our hands, Mark turned to me. "Do you think we deserve happiness?" he asked quietly. His question wasn't selfish. It was wounded. I took a long breath. "I think we deserve to try," I answered. "And I think that's all anyone can do." He nodded, and something eased in him. That was the night I realized our new life wasn't about erasing the past. It was about carrying it gently, without letting it drown us. We learned to forgive ourselves slowly, not all at once. Some days were easier, some were painful. But we didn't run anymore. We didn't pretend to be people we weren't. We learned to be human again. One morning, months later, Mark and I went back to the charity garden, the place where everything began, the laughter, the connection, the spark neither of us understood yet. It looked exactly the same, quiet, calm, hidden from the world. He took my hand. I felt a rush of memories, all mixed together. The night we met, the night everything broke, the days we started to rebuild. "We didn't choose the timing," he said softly, "but I choose you now. Fully, honestly, no secrets." I squeezed his hand. "And I choose you." We stood in silence, letting the past settle around us like soft air. It didn't hurt as much anymore. It felt like something that shaped us instead of something that ruined us. Life didn't give us a fairy tale beginning. It gave us a truth. Complicated, painful, imperfect, but real. Our love wasn't something people would admire or celebrate. It wasn't a story everyone would understand. Some would judge, some would whisper, some would remain angry. But we weren't living for them. We were living for the quiet moments when everything felt right, when all the noise faded and only truth remained. And in that quiet truth, Mark and I found something deep, fragile, and real enough to hold on to. We walked out of the garden hand in hand, ready to face whatever came next, not with guilt anymore, but with acceptance. Our new life didn't erase the past. It simply grew around it, together.